Can everybody hear me? Everyone in the back? Fantastic. Awesome. So it's been 3 days of everything, fintech, AI, blockchain. These are words that are usually categorized under buzzwords, but there's an entire conference on it, so maybe there's some money there. Let's just focus on all the things that we can grow on. And the reason I'm very excited about this panel is we have 4 individuals who are extremely banking, fintech specific, being moderated by a crypto founder. So imagine how interesting that's going to be. Very dangerous, but I'm excited about that. And I'll go right in and actually introduce the actual panel and what it's called. It's called Future Ready, and basically pioneering game-changing innovations in the industry, enterprises, corporations, banks, etc., etc. And I'll go ahead and actually introduce the panelists. I'll start with Kelvin. Kelvin is CEO of Audax Financial Tech, a spin-off from Standard Chartered Bank, offering banks around the world a modern, scalable bank-in-the-box technology solution. Previously, he was managing director at Standard Chartered Bank and delivered the bank's global bank-as-a-service platform. Lema, ex-banker turned serial fintech entrepreneur with successful exit and early-stage investor from her own family office, currently advises government and fintech policy for GCC entrepreneurs in all things fintech. Previously experience includes Goldman Sachs, Standard Chartered Bank, and founding her own ventures. Hussein rejoined Diraya recently, is the Chief Digital and Transformation Officer, a premier digital trading and investment firm in Saudi Arabia. He leads strategy, oversees digital product development, and drives technological transformation. Previously, he was the Group Chief Information Officer at Gulf International Bank, where he played a key role in launching and expanding the first digital bank in Saudi Arabia and GCC. Pervi, co-founder and CEO of SAV, a fintech built on the foundations of open banking and AI, designed to make money work for everyone. The company offers autonomous financial solutions for consumers across saving, spending, investing, and debt management. In her earlier roles, Pervi led product launches for consumer banking, payments, products for Citi and APAC markets, later with MasterCard and advisory. I'm going to jump right into it because we're very excited and you can see my energy. Lema, I'm going to start with you. What are the different areas that you've witnessed different realms, and you can really see how different stakeholders are thinking? That being said, when it comes to startups working with these large corporations, how can they be a bit more lenient? They can shine on their value propositions a bit more.
Yes, absolutely. So startups definitely have significantly more agility. They are not hierarchical. They're not extremely process-oriented. They can ideate, explore, and go to market super fast. They're definitely super cost-efficient. They don't have legacy systems. And this makes them quite competitive on the pricing side. That's why they tend to be subscription models on the market. You want me to elaborate on how startups can be better than traditional
Easier
banking?
process working with enterprises.
Yes, absolutely. So I think probably my most favorite example to bring here would be customer experience, right? This is the part where startups shine. They nail the UX game. From the onboarding moment to the digital interface, they do it better than any bank out there, and this is where I think they really shine.
Very true, yeah, I like that. And they come from a different state of mind, no high risk, no layers. It's just a good push and pull.
Absolutely, and this is what allows them to actually target niche markets, to bank the unbanked, to bank micro SMEs, which usually are quite forgotten by legacy players.
True.
Yeah.
Can I?
Go for it.
So you introduce us as bankers.
Yes, my apologies.
I think what banks are good at, given their size, the complexity, the structure of banks, is to create a one-size-fits-all type of products. And that's fine, that's important for the economy. But where fintechs can play a role, I think in more personalized product and services, so they can tackle niche or vertical much better, giving how agility, as Lama said, their agility and their at least perceived modern technology, they can really serve that segment. So I don't see by doing such they will compete really with the banks, but they will complement what traditional banks is offering to the market, especially in the SME area.
Yeah, agreed. And when it comes to your current role at Diraya, how do you see the involvement of startups and the investment scene changing? So you've witnessed the changes across the last 5-6 years. How has it evolved?
I think the industry evolved a lot in the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
We sometimes like to call ourselves the first fintech in the region, Diraya. So we are no stranger for this ecosystem. Now, how do we see, how do we fit in this ecosystem? We see ourselves in the forefront of it. We do partnership with a lot of fintechs. Just during this event, we signed three agreements already, partnership. I think we are well known that we are, we like to partner with other service providers. We see this really complement our products and help us provide seamless product and services for our client. Not only that, actually, of course, apart from a VC fund that we do also operate, we do invest from our P&L as well. We have done quite a few investments in the last few years, and we are looking to do more. But I think the main game changer for having such beautiful forum is really what the regulators were doing the last few years.
Definitely.
By enabling the sandbox and the recent regulation that allow this economy really to grow.
Very true. So it's interesting. I wanted to tackle, the evolution with you and go to Kelvin with the future game changers that you predict. Having witnessed the growth, we talked about value propositions. In the next few years, there's an interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years, which I totally despise. But in the next 4 or 5 years, what do you think are some of the game-changing technologies that may arise?
I think the easy response to that would be AI. Everybody talks about AI, but I'm not a cop-out. Let's not go there first. I think there are 3 things that really will be quite interesting to observe over the next couple of years. I make 1 bold prediction, 2 bold predictions, and 1 observation. The first bold prediction is this. I think that the geographical regional trends of fintech creation is happening now in the region here, in the kingdom and in the region in general. Very much like how it propagated in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, and very much like how it propagated in Southeast Asia in the early 2010s, mid-2000s, basically. What will happen is there will be a proliferation of fintechs solving niche problems, and there will be a race to scale. And what will happen is you'll have a bunch of fintechs that will scale effectively, like those in Europe, and who will eventually start looking at being licensed and actually offering services as a licensed entity. Eventually, some of them becoming banks, like Revolut, for example. And then the rest of them will go through a phase of consolidation by being acquired by banks as capability enhancers. That wave has ended pretty much in Southeast Asia, and you'll start seeing that soon. And it's at the beginning and the inception in the region here in GCC. So the next 5 years will be interesting to see whether or not that cycle continues to perpetuate versus what happens in the rest of the world. The second prediction I want to make is this, and I said this in my morning when I was here on this very stage, is that all banks today face one fundamental problem. And that fundamental problem manifests itself in all the things that banks do, which is let's get better at UI UX and acquire customers at lower cost. As you mentioned, let's create a better set of products. Let's have new business models like embedded finance and banking as a service, and let's have AI work through productivity enhancements. All of that leads to a singular problem in my mind, which is the fact that banks don't generate a high enough return on equity on their balance sheet. And if you were a global investor looking at banks as an asset class, you would think of them as trading 2 to 4 times book, 6 times if you're lucky, versus a tech company who would trade at maybe 20 times book.
True.
And that conversation becomes a real discussion with investors. And therefore, banks are pressed with almost no exception in my mind to generate better return on equity, and therefore all those actions that they're doing. What you will see is a proliferation of banks in this region, for sure, and we already see that in our conversations, as Audac's conversation with banks here, engaging into a large-scale banking as a service deployment, embedded finance. We start putting together automated AI chatbots, and so on and so forth. So those are my 2 predictions. And my 1 interesting observation here is this. I'm not sure, I really am not sure if AI will take off in the way we think it will take off. Everyone talks about it. It's very exciting. It's great for productivity enhancements. I think Copilot is one of the best things I've ever seen from a developer productivity standpoint. But we also need to remember that the statistics are clear. 90% of AI projects don't make it past POC.
True.
So what does that really mean? And then to add a little point, which I also said in the morning as a joke, somewhat, AI combined with the evolution in the next 5 years of quantum computing, I fear Skynet might be a reality.
That's fair.
Yeah, no, very valid points, especially considering like you look at the technology scape and there's you can't use AI without data being inputted from different stakeholders. There's a huge gap when it comes to the regulatory body. Where's that data coming from? And how can AI be successful without having them play a key role as a stakeholder? Maybe Privy, I'll jump right to you with that. How are you mapping out the regulatory scape? I know you've been back and forth to Saudi recently. You've established more predominantly in the UAE. And how has that regulatory jump been for you so far?
So how we see the overall landscape here evolving is we've got the building blocks in place. We've got all the talks and deployment around open finance. We have got AI. We have got embedded finance. Now the next piece, and that's going to be the evolutionary piece, is how do we put it all together and try to put money on autopilot? It's no more going to be a conversation about whether it's banks versus a startup versus a technology company. We understand today, from a banking standpoint, they bring in the regulatory know-how, they've got huge amount of data, there are robust infrastructure. They could be in different formats, but they're robust enough, right? So now, if AI comes to the core and we are able to build relevant use cases over the data that is scattered across customer spending behavior, saving behavior, e-commerce purchases, it's just going to be a very personalized autonomous journey, not only from a user standpoint, but how banks would be able to bring it closer to a user's lifestyle. Now, from a regulatory standpoint, I don't think there are missing blocks, right? Things are taking time because we understand everything around data security, infrastructure. These are key building elements for a market which is just opening for things which are huge, right? And hence, any conversation. We know AIS came in around 2021 and now 21, 22, and now we've got things around PIS coming in, right? So slowly and steadily, things are getting mobilized, and there's more responsibility in the ecosystem that exists than anything else.
Very interesting. Like you said, it's happening slow and steady, but you can't build unless it's happening in parallel. Something I personally believe with, which is super old, like ask for forgiveness and not permission. Totally agree with that mindset. In being in the fintech world, that's dangerous, but you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
Maybe Lemma, I'll come back to you, and you exited a few startups. You're now like within the serial entrepreneur, but you're also with like advising bankers. Looking at the scape, are there certain outlier startups that are keeping you excited? Because personally, looking at the scene, if you map it out, there's a lot of reoccurring startups doing the same thing over and over and over again. What would be some outliers?
Without mentioning names, I'll probably just focus on the problem they're solving. I think the most exciting startups for me right now are the ones that are building decentralized finance technologies. And I think this is something you like, being in your space. But anyone who's right now trying to cut intermediary banks from the middle and revolutionize payments and cross-border payments through also CBDCs and digital assets is really an outlier for me. I was talking to David Cunningham on another panel who's like the head of digital assets at Citi, and he's now saying, since trade never sleeps, we've decided to build digital assets and keep the money flowing 24/7.
Wow.
Right? So any work that's happening in that space where money is flowing 24/7, where intermediary banks are being cut from the middle, where we're revolutionizing payments, is super exciting to me.
Definitely, I definitely agree on that point. I'm definitely biased. But that being said, you know, I think to give the bank ecosystem a pat on the back, I think open banking one step towards that before jumping the full gun. And maybe Calvin, I'll go to you. Within the scape, you know, so open banking is making the space more competitive. How do you feel like it's actually opening doors for like I don't want to say just startups and founders, even enterprises, with the space getting more competitive through AI, through open banking, how is the space changing?
Well, first and foremost, we need to understand what open banking really is, right? People confuse the terms open banking, embedded finance, banking as a service, and whatever.
Yeah.
You ask 20 people, you get 20 definitions. So my definition of open banking really is the open banking defines the individual's and the company's relationship with data. Right? It means that you own your data and therefore can grant access to your data in any third-party or fourth-party ecosystem on the basis that there is some kind of universal standards that are secure and compliant. That's what open banking is, in my opinion. Now, on the back of that, it does democratize certain things. Previously, you had banks having a monopoly on your transactional data, for example. And therefore, when open banking was first introduced in the UK, there were many banks who were very reluctant to participate in open banking. And even today, it's not taken off in the same way that everyone envisaged it to be, I think, 10 years ago. There has been a lot more progress, and some would argue, and in fact, I'm one of those who would argue to a large extent, that the progression of open banking in the Gulf is far more rapid than the inception of, in Europe with PSD2 and PSD3. So from that perspective, it's democratized access to data to some extent, and it's allowed for fintech players to participate in having access to the data and creating new products on top of that, and providing it to the end consumer and to some extent SMEs. Not much has been done from an open banking standpoint with large corporates as far as I can tell. So yes, interesting, yes, democratizing data, yes, new business models. How many of those business models are actually going to lead to scalable profitability? Don't know. There are a few players who try to be intermediaries, therefore, like TrueLayer, for example, in Europe. Early days, as far as I can tell. And open banking, where the second most advanced place where it has actually been mandatory to a large extent is Australia, right? Where
Interesting.
it hasn't taken off,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So, don't know. The reality is open banking conceptually has democratized some things, but has it really taken off? Don't know. I actually think Bahrain, having been one of the first in this region to have done it, and seeing a lot more progressive adoption, and here in the kingdom, would be a far more interesting test case.
What do you think, Hussein?
I mean, I was thinking, so open banking is the framework that force banks to open up, right? For fintechs.
Yeah.
How about fintechs? Are they open up for each other? I think I'm a pro, of course, being my technology background, I'm pro open API concept. So open banking is something, I think it's at least open up, the idea of customer-centric solution where the customer, the individual really own the data and he chooses where the data can be processed from. But that just the first step, really, for a much bigger an ecosystem that we can create with each other. So I don't think we need the regulators.
True.
And they did a great job. I'm speaking from someone who have complied with open banking in 3 jurisdictions, in Bahrain, Saudi, and the UK. I think the mindset, especially in this forum, we should not really wait for the regulators to come up with a framework for us to open up and start integrating with each other. I think that's what would be very interesting to see now fintechs start opening up and exchange APIs with each other. But I don't see it yet, to be honest with you.
And how do you
we don't need a regulator to tell us to do it. So I think we have the framework, we can expand upon it.
Definitely. And how do you see the landscape actually changing if they actually start getting more open, as you mentioned?
I hope so. I hope, but I'm yet to see enough of that. I think that's that also will be a game changer for the fintech ecosystem in the future.
Very true, yeah. Kelvin, I'm going to go back to you. So we were talking about, the last point we mentioned is regulations, and you've witnessed it through Far East Asia, you've obviously seen the Emirates, now you're more involved in the GCC. There were like 3 or 4 takeaways for like different stakeholders and like major learnings. You look at the market and all the PR has all the good news. Maybe you can mention some of the things that we don't know that happened behind scenes. That was a learning that you want to take to another market?
I think one of the biggest learnings, and in all honesty, I haven't had much interaction with regulators until I started doing this about 7 years ago. One of the biggest learning is that regulators around the world all talk to each other. I think that's a big learning. So the trends will permeate and propagate across the region, so which is how open banking became a thing in multiple places.
Yeah.
Now, the way I think about it, and most people need to remember that the regulatory's obligations, their first job, is to protect the citizens of whichever country that they are the regulators of. And therefore, they will always look at data security, compliance, hence the increasing trend of having data localization in country. Doesn't have to be obviously on-prem in a data center, physical data center that is built by the entire bank, but it could be in a cloud environment in the country, but definitely in country in terms of the preferences. Now, whether or not that actually introduces incremental risk or decreases the exposure of data DLP, or data leakage, is arguable and questionable, and that's a debate that has been ongoing for a while now. My overall view is that over time, you would see generally a move of regulatory preferences moving from the US and Europe down to Asia and propagating somewhat past the GCC. So what is interesting, and that was the traditional model, what is interesting that we want to start looking for, and I think right now we are at very early stages, is whether or not the regulatory trends can start from elsewhere and propagate backwards into most of Western society, which I haven't seen at this point,
True.
which I suspect will happen in the next couple of years.
Yeah, very interesting point. And the thing is, whether it's regulations or basic marketing strategies, the way they're accepted by the average customer is so different that even if you look at the international market functioning a certain way, it doesn't mean that it will be successful in your home ground. And I think that's why you mentioned that, yes, the regulatory bodies or the adoption is fast, but it's still very cautious. Rightfully so, right? Makes sense to why they would do that. Maybe I'll go to you, Privy, and looking at the market as someone who has dabbled more into the AI space and mixing fintech within that whole space. And you mentioned MasterCard as well, you advised them as well. Looking at that space and someone like MasterCard, right? How have they adapted to the market in terms of not just their enterprise models, but I noticed recently they also started funding startups, they're even looking at female founders. How's that space looking, and how maybe get the audience excited?
Yeah. I think the entire ecosystem is pretty excited about how things are shaping up in general, and everyone wants to get a pie for it. Without naming, we have seen some of the largest banks in here spinning off their tech verticals, and that's for the reason because you need to build better and closer use cases for the users. There are also funds that they are launching because they see that there could be so many use cases that could be built over not only their data, but once the data becomes more interoperable, how do we get a chunk of that, right? And that's where enablers like MasterCard or Visa would want to come in and see that while we are in touch with so many financial institutions and fintechs on the other side, how do they become a powerful conduit to bring the use cases or builders of use cases together with people who have got the power of data, audience, consumers, and so much more, right? So there are investments, there are new product suites, there's a lot of advisory work that is going on. So yeah, the landscape just gets more exciting and everyone wants to be a part of it, be it a fintech, a technology major, or yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially considering everyone wants a piece of the cake as well. No matter what your business model is, somehow everyone invests now, regardless of who they are, which is good, right? The money's flowing, you need believers, and if you have a stakeholder that understands a piece of the landscape that you do not, i.e. you would potentially be a more successful startup. But it's just interesting when you have like a banker, with all due respect, on your cap table, and they're asking questions, you're like, bro, this is not how a startup works. Please listen to me, you know?
That's quite true.
I feel my pain.
Exactly, yeah. So I think as closing thoughts, I want to go to each and one of you, and you guys can mention, there's a lot of newbies. Obviously, this conference is filled with people who want to get into the fintech world. If you could mention one or two mistakes that you would not wish upon anyone, I'll start with you, Purvi, what would it be?
I think it's very important to be testing use cases than assuming things about the market. Not that we've made those mistakes, but we often see that if there's something which is, and this is one of the chat we were having this morning in the cab as well, that we assume if things are successful in the Western world, they can be just put in here, and they are going to be massive in this geography as well. But we need to constantly see what is the level of financial literacy that exists on the ground, what is the level of awareness, acceptance, and those are going to be the forming factor when we see whether there would be an adoption of technology, where would be an adoption of use case, and then obviously how do we create those conversations with regulators on different fronts.
Makes sense, yeah, definitely. How about you, Lemo?
So a mistake I've made that I want to give advice on would be not including compliance within the fintech products since day one, because as founders we get very, very excited. We want to boil the ocean, and then we say we worry about the regulators later on, and we try to ask with these guys it doesn't work. That why we ask for forgiveness, you know. So my advice would be for all entrepreneurs to include regulatory and compliance in their product roadmap since day one or since day zero. That
Very
would be it.
interesting.
Yeah.
That it's the against the founder's nature, you know,
Yeah,
to be
absolutely.
like to look at risk. No, we'll put that to the side. Yeah. How about you, Calvin?
Well, 2 points. The first, jokingly, first mistake I made was to enter the technology space in fintech, I think, which leads to the serious point. The second point is, it's not a mistake to some extent. You need significant amount of resilience in doing so, right? You're going to get a million no's. You're going to get a million, it can't work. You're going to get banks telling you that it doesn't make sense for various reasons. And in order for you to have that resilience, you shouldn't beat yourself up that much. In all honesty, it was bad for me from a mental health perspective. So something to not repeat. And the way to do it, in my mind, is quite simple. At the end of the day, if you're in fintech, right, and fundamentally the industry is about payment flows and financial services, you are not curing cancer. You are not curing cancer. If you screw up, nobody dies. No baby dies at the
That's
very
true.
least. Now, if you remember that and don't take yourself so seriously, it helps with the resilience.
Very nice. How about you, Hussein?
I think I changed my answer 3 times after listening to my colleagues, but I definitely share the same mistake as you, picking technology. I think not realizing that the only constant is in life is change till later on in my career. I think this is something I want to pass. Life is changing all the time. Regulators do change. Frameworks, technologies. So adapting this mindset, not only in our design principle for technology and operation, it's also culturally and adopted as a DNA. And what we do, I think, is very important.
Definitely agree.
That would be my mistake that I want people to avoid.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. We have a few minutes for questions. If anyone would like to ask questions, yeah, go for it. Can we give her a microphone? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Manar. I am finance consultant from Sudan. I have a few questions regarding the AI. AI is overhyped in essence, especially in the last year and the last 2 years. Like it affected countries like the US because it was overhyped and it didn't give the intended ROI. How do you evaluate the cost-benefit analysis of integrating an AI solution as the investors or even bank? This is one thing. Going also to the future, how do you support the the innovation and the DeFi that you talked about, especially in economy or landscape that is challenging and monopolized by the big tech, and they are fighting or trying to take this new tech out, and how they can even support each other, as mentioned by Mr. Hussein, in order to attain that scale. And lastly, how the general support system in Saudi Arabia supporting the new tech. I know that the blockchain was invented by Japan, but it was highly adopted in the US and other countries. That's why it thrived there. How we can support the innovation and tech in the Middle East, or in order to be the big new thing. Thank you.
Hussein, you want to start with adapting tech?
I think that was a very lengthy question. Thank you. Maybe let me just address a few things about the AI. Allow me to disagree with you. I don't think the AI is overhyped. I think AI is reality, and I can assure you, probably the banks that you are using today have one or two use cases that are already deploying AI.
True.
I think when it's come to artificial intelligence, we just started. The only concern that we have some ethical use of the AI, the access of data, and our lack of understanding maybe internally within the financial sector. How can we leverage AI? But I can assure you, AI is here to just to grow. And so when it's come to evaluating the return over investment for AI, I think it's quite simple really. It will bring definitely efficiency. That's one easy one when you're using AI. And I think it will open a lot of opportunities for products. We talked about maybe briefly about personalized product, and I think the modern investor, the modern individual, when they approach their financial service, really the challenge we are facing, the persona now is way more personalized services. It's overwhelming everywhere, from the social media, from the internet, from the news. People want to see very personalized, very targeted product and services, and that's seamless, easy to use. And there is no way to achieve it, with the regular algorithm or systems from financial service perspective. So I think that's a very good area for AI to give return over investment on. I will leave probably the other part of the question to my colleagues.
I think
Especially
I'll have
the blockchain
something small to add in here. With see an ecosystem where money is so personalized that you would only start expecting a Google Maps for money for yourself, where the ecosystem should be able to identify what your starting point is today and where you want to reach, right? And how Google Maps points everything in between, your coffee stops, the detours, everything. That's how your money is going to look like. When you want to achieve a goal, what are the saving products you need, the investment products that you need? Maybe you require debts along the way, right? But it's going to be extremely personalized and offered to you when you truly need it. And for that, like he said, it's only going to require something at massive scale to mobilize what we have got right now in the region to play out.
Yeah. Even drawing that line between a personalized product and then being able to mass produce that, it's just, there's that fine line where you just miss it, and I assume that's the sweet spot, but it's just very difficult to reach, especially in the fintech world, right? Lemma, what's your thoughts on that?
So, going back to the questions you asked, right? How do we assess whether the use case for AI makes sense or not, or whether it's dangerous or it's not, right? And my answer is that you have to take it case by case. So let's say, for example, trade finance, digital trade finance, a global topic, right? If it weren't for the AI use cases, we wouldn't be having very quick credit assessments. We wouldn't be having a predictive analytics tool that would really give us live data that allows us to make quick, informed decisions. We wouldn't be able to predict supply chain disruptions, right? So AI has been absolutely useful in so many different cases, to the point where it's driving large institutions to have to adopt it, not only to provide better services, but to adjust their compliance and regulatory monitoring, right? Now, does AI need to be regulated? Absolutely yes. Is that something I can answer? Definitely not. But I do advocate for the use, or at least how AI has helped me and all my co-founder friends, and a lot of these startups that you see succeed here. Probably most of them have used some sort of LLM models and how they're doing predictive analytics at the least, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Very true. Do you have any points?
I have nothing material to add but a joke.
Go for it.
And the joke is, does it add $100 million to your valuation? ROI is there.
That's true. Awesome. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Nabil, and I'm head of technology at Arabia Pictures. I have the question for the panelists. I'm not sure it's for the moderator as well. Maybe
worries.
it fits her.
Sorry, can you speak up, please?
Sure.
Thank-
Okay. It's Nabil. I'll cut it short this time. And straight with the questions. I have two questions. Number one is about the open banking, which Calvin was saying that if you ask 20%, they have 20 opinions. So here's my 21st. I think open banking is about people are going to catch up with what DeFi is offering. So the question comes in, the DeFi, is it going to kill the open banking concept? Because the whole concept is about cutting for the DeFi, yeah, we are cutting the the banks out of it. But for the open banking, what we are trying to do, we are trying to create ease of access for the people. They don't have to visit branches. They can get it done over a call or over the app. Yeah. So the more DeFi will go into it, is it going to kill the idea of open banking? And question number two about the DeFi. How do we get the traditional people on DeFi? For instance, Salwa would know, for the DeFi especially, if I want to borrow something, I have to put something as a collateral, and that has to be from digital assets. But the traditional people, they don't own any digital assets. How do we bring the traditional users on DeFi? Yeah, that's it. Otherwise,
Let
if my
you guys
question is
start.
confusing, I can come up with it.
Go for it.
Thank you.
I'll
I
take
can take that one.
You want to give?
Go ahead.
Oh, please go
No,
ahead.
just a statement, really. While we talk about DeFi and we talk about, let's not leave the open banking piece out, but talk about DeFi and CBCDs and a whole bunch of other stuff that we want to do. The reality of the situation is that the use cases for decentralized finance have yet to scale and take hold and really scale. The reality is that. Has DeFi supplemented Swift?
No, not yet.
Not yet. Do you still send your orders through 101s? You do. So yes, there have been interesting use cases, and there have been companies that have been built on it significantly, and I think it will become a lot more interesting, but it's early days. I don't even think you can make the statement that it will replace and these intermediate banks at scale today. I think that's my personal opinion. And on the piece on open banking, it doesn't really change anything, in my view. If you look at open banking as sovereignty over your own data and granting access to that data, DeFi won't kill open banking as a concept. If it works in the long run in terms of the perseverance of trust, then what happens is it will become a tool to enable open banking at scale. It's the way I think about it.
Absolutely, and I agree with him. I hate to be the person who answers the questions with "it depends," but the answer to your question is "it depends" because it depends on the use cases. So I'll give you one of them. Let's imagine we're building a wealth tech solution for family holdings. There's thousands or maybe tens of thousands of family holdings in Saudi, right? These family holdings have real estate, they have private assets, jewelry, boats, etc., right? Let's say we want to give them access to their portfolio measurement or performance measurement. So we use OpenAI, hopefully one day, and go extract the data from different sources, from their different banks, and just compile it into one screen for them, and that's a great use case for OpenAI, right? Let's say DeFi had nothing to do with that, as an example, right? DeFi would never kill that. It had nothing to do with the concept. DeFi, a great use case for DeFi is essentially what we mentioned earlier, is cutting the middleman when we're doing transfers, where we're doing trade finance, when we have these issues such as the cutoff timing for transfers from Saudi at like 3 p.m., but global trade never sleeps, right? So I think it's a case-by-case scenario, and I do agree with Kevin.
I think it's also important that they work in complementary to each other because they're both solving different problems in silos. And then when you are able to mass produce and it's efficient, then you start to merge and integrate to one another so you solve in the long run.
Yeah.
So I agree too, and it's also an answer to your second question, like traditional people in the market will only adopt once it's foolproof, it's scalable, and it's ready to go because there's too much money on the line for them to try these proof of concepts, right? Yeah. Awesome, so we have 30 seconds left. Perfect timing. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thank you, panelists, for
Thank you.
today. And yeah, I appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Thanks.